Welcome back to another episode of Planning in Practice. We have John Hannon returning as our guest today. He is a well sought after estate planning attorney here in Irvine, Orange County. And today we're going to talk about the importance of how each person has a professional in their life, but things really can work together when the professionals are on the same page. So John's going to tell us an example here of a couple scenarios where he's had some clients that did not involve their financial planner or did not involve the tax professional. So John, take it away.
Well, thanks, Grant, for having me.
Yeah.
I love having our conversations.
Absolutely.
It's fun. I like learning from you, learning from you a
And I
lot.
learn a lot from you as well.
So you wanted me to share a scenario where, kind of continued planning makes sense. And when I was back, first year young associate back in the day working for an office in Santa Barbara, there was a husband and wife, and they had 5 children, and the husband passed away. And my boss, he really liked kind of the drama.
Yeah.
So nobody does an actual reading of the will, but
Only in movies.
Yeah, so he wanted to do it. So he told everybody had to fly out, the mom and all the kids, they had to fly out, come to the office, and everyone sat around the mahogany table for a reading of the will, which never happens. It's like some episode of Succession or something.
Yeah.
And so they're reading the will, they're reading the trusts and the amendments and then the structure, and it's all getting laid out. And I'm watching at this table with some people with very strong personalities.
Yes.
And they are far along in their careers, and they have children of their own. And this is the first time they've seen this plan.
Oh boy.
And it's interesting to watch everyone's reactions to it. And there had been things done earlier before Dad passed away that not everyone knew about.
Oh boy.
Okay, so there was a family business, right?
Okay.
And so Dad had gifted large chunks of this family business to the firstborn son.
And not everybody knew.
But not everybody knew the extent of it and how it worked. And it happened over a few years, right? Some daughters got real estate in nice areas that had appreciated a lot. And so we're because not everybody had, knew the full plan or knew the gifting over time, you're seeing questions pop up like, wait, why did that person get that asset so early? Or how come your asset, real estate, was appreciating so much and my asset, the business, doesn't have the same day to death value as your... And they would say, well, it's because you didn't manage it very well, right? That's on you.
Yeah.
And he'd say, well, you didn't really do anything for that appreciation. You just sat there and you just got appreciated.
Sure.
So all of this is coming out. And then mom is sitting there as the kind of arbiter of the children.
Yeah.
And you're just saying, oh my goodness, what a mess. And so now people are coming up with, well, can we equalize? I was like, well, it's kind of too late.
Yeah.
The plan is now irrevocable because Dad passed away.
Right.
And so they're saying, well, can I get some money? And then one child who never got anything is like, well, you all got something. I didn't get anything during life. That's not fair. And then it comes out. Certain kids were getting grandkids were getting their college paid for, but not others. And some went to nicer schools than others. And it's all coming out.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my goodness. And there's enough money here where it's like, yeah, these are issues.
Sure.
Right? And so this is going to be a long, difficult administration. And I don't know if the family's going to survive this scenario.
Oh boy.
So I say all that to say as an example of certain families with certain assets, certain complexity, it makes sense to have, to think through how are we communicating this plan to the next generation and the generation after.
Yeah.
Right? On so many levels. How are we communicating the estate plan? How are we communicating the different types of assets and what the plan of that?
Sure.
Like business succession, what does that look like?
Sure.
With closely held businesses. How do the children even have financial education to be able to understand what this plan is?
Right, or what they're inheriting, yeah.
And so there was all sorts of levels of that in this family dynamic with 5 children. You had some who just don't care about finances, others who that was their career, others just focus on the business. And so you have all sorts of levels which can create and breed all this miscommunication.
Yeah.
Right? So, in those scenarios, I'll go into what I think from an estate planning perspective, but from a financial planner's perspective, how do you think about communicating plans? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And then if you do, how to a family?
Yeah. So obviously, in an ideal scenario, we start while both parents are still alive.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things where I explain to the husband and wife, it's a difficult conversation. There's no way around it. It's going to be tough. But do it in a way, or do it in a position where it's not as tough or as awkward as it could be. For example, I had a client who really liked building and maintaining old vehicles. He had this 1955 Chevy truck. It was beautiful. And so his son was there and part of it. And so I said, he's like, hey, I don't know how to talk to my son about money. And I said, well, you guys both love cruising in that truck, right? He said, yeah. I said, well, then go up PCH, go up Highway 1 on a Sunday afternoon and just feel the breeze, just be in that situation together. And then broach, hey, I need to talk to you about something. You both are feeling good. You're not guarded. You're not like, oh, here's a financial conversation for my dad. It's in this nice open setting. And so what I do is I try to coach parents at any age. How do you broach that topic with the next generation? If they want to do it that way, great. What I also recommend is as you get more advanced in years, bring them in. I'm very good at having tough conversations and very good at helping navigate that with families. Hey, this is what mom and dad have. This is what their wishes are. This is how things are invested now. Here's what's going to happen according to the current trust when they pass, and explain that to them. Here's who's going to get what, and here's going to get how you're going to get it, and potentially how long that could take. So starting in the beginning is usually the most ideal way to go. Now, of course, that always doesn't happen. And sometimes afterwards, it is difficult conversations because people don't have a financial background or a law background, and they don't quite get it and understand it. But having everyone in a room together with the estate planning attorney to say, yes, no, because again, I'm not a legal representative. I manage assets, I manage money. I lean on the legal representative to tell me who it goes to. And then I'm the one that works, potentially with the estate planning attorney to figure out who gets what and why. And then we can bring in a tax preparer to figure out who gets what, why, based on certain tax situations. So it's really great to have everyone involved sooner rather than later. But it's never too late.
Yeah, no, I like what you were sharing about kind of using you as like a tool to frame that conversation, because it might be, when in our world, it's like communicating the plan, okay, but when it's a father communicating it to a son, that there's a history there that might be difficult. You can kind of come in as a third party and have that conversation and frame it in a certain way, and then they can ask you questions. And I like involving, all the different professionals at some level. For me, my thought about it is, sometimes with a very simple, they just have a couple IRAs and they just have a brokerage account. You maybe don't need to tell them earlier. I always encourage it, but sometimes the family dynamics, it's just like, we cannot have that conversation. It is too hard. And I would say in simpler scenarios, maybe, you can do that. But as soon as you start involving complexity, real estate portfolio, closely held businesses, some of that stuff, I would encourage to have that conversation earlier and not think of it as like the one conversation.
Sure.
But as like many conversations over time, and you can introduce these things. Because again, some people just don't have maybe the financial background, and so maybe they'll get misconceptions. I've seen that a lot. I've seen, two kids were there, they're older, and they're with mom, and one child is asking all these questions, but in a very accusative way. Because he thinks that, sister has been too close to mom, and it's like, no. This is a normal plan.
Right.
Like they are normal things that are happening. Sister's not doing anything, but he just doesn't have the background to know.
Right.
About that. So that's why professionals can be a big help. And I would say another tool would be like doing a family meeting periodically.
Yes.
That can be super big.
That's huge.
And in our world, I think there's all sorts of like, what does the family meeting mean? And it can be, more formal, it can be less formal, but I think it can be structured for the family in a way that makes sense. And at a minimum, you're doing something where you're educating. just on financial concepts, we talk about powers of appointment. We talk about
Sure.
step up in basis and all these different things. So there can be a communication of that. Personal financial education for kids. I know of a family meeting recently where that was a big point of emphasis.
Yeah.
Is just, you are starting in your career. We want to make sure that you, on a personal level, are managing and building your wealth in a wise manner.
Sure.
So that this estate plan from the parents is supplemental.
Yeah.
And can really just enhance what you're doing,
Sure.
not just be the full replacement.
Yeah, or not counting on that to retire. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think, doing family meetings on a regular periodic basis where there's education involved, there is explaining how the plan works.
Yes.
And then opportunity for questions of like, hey, mom and dad, did you think about
Yeah.
how you paid for college for one sibling, but you didn't pay for college for these other ones? Is
Yeah.
there any sort of equalization? And, I like to think in terms of, roles and rules. So when the parents are alive, they're in the role of parents.
Yeah.
And whatever they say goes. But once they pass away, everyone looks at the rules, right? And so if you have these conversations over time, here's the plan, here's the status of our assets, here's our, what we're intending to do.
Sure.
We're going to try someone to start succeeding to the business. After a few years, it doesn't work. Change the plan, right?
Yeah.
They're in the role to basically say, what we say goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? To try things out. And if it doesn't work, correct course. But once they pass away, everyone's just looking at the rules.
Yeah.
And so you would hope that over time, if you're having feedback from the family, that you're able to craft those rules in a way that makes sense, that is bespoke to that particular family.
Yeah.
That makes sense so that the rules aren't like at that meeting I had,
Yeah.
a complete shock.
Oh, absolutely.
And everyone has lots of questions. Like, no, we've thought through this. These rules make sense. It's going to
Yeah.
work for us. We have a plan. And we're all on board. And the other part of having those meetings over time, you can tailor them to the maturity and the age of your children or grandchildren over time. Because sharing it all at once might not make sense for an 18-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
It's like there's certain things you don't need to know as an 18-year-old.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
absolutely.
We don't want you banking on this and making certain career decisions that way. So you can tailor it that way.
Absolutely. In fact, that's a really good point, because there's two things that I want to say that, when people inherit money, unfortunately, by the third generation, it's all gone.
Yeah.
It doesn't
there's
matter the
statistics
size
about
of the estate.
Family businesses, like only a third of them survive to the next third generation.
Yeah, because it's financial mismanagement.
Yeah.
They get too much money too young and they waste it. And it's really sad, because me, having worked with these parents and being young enough to continue to work with the second and even third generations, just seeing what grandfather wanted and watch it just rapidly get used in just nonsensical ways, because people get too much money when they're too young. But I do want to go back to the family planning meeting.
Yeah.
And one of the best examples I have was actually my dad. He was he worked in the school district, but he also did some mediation on the side. And when my mother's mother, my grandmother, she was diagnosed with cancer, so we knew she was on her way out. It was pretty aggressive. My mother and her four sisters all got together in my grandmother's house with my grandmother, and basically my dad took the trust and kind of went down line by line. Okay, here's what this says. Who wants this Lexus SUV that she had? And then this person got it, and then we looked for the grandmother. Is that okay? Oh yeah, she can have that. So it was a way where they could go through most of the trust together with the next gen, with the person who owned all of it. So my grandmother could say, yes, you get this, or no, you don't get this. Why? Because I said so, and I wanted to go to this person.
Yeah.
So, you don't have that when the person's passed. But they were able to, my mother and her four sisters were all able to sit down and agree, and when she passed, everything worked so smoothly. Yeah. I know that doesn't happen with everybody, and not every family dynamic is that way, but that's a great example of even how they could utilize you or myself or together to sit down and say, okay, let's have a family meeting, and this is what we're talking about. Now, naturally, they went through everything. You don't have to go in that much detail, but if we have a family meeting and say, okay, does anyone have a proclivity towards real estate? Okay, well, perhaps then those people would be the ones to get the real estate. How do we offset the value of the house with the value of, say, the actual investable assets in the trust? You know, how do we make that whole? How do we make that fair? So having those conversations early, and even while the parents are still alive, is monumental in passing that on to the next generation. Because the parents can even say their wishes at that point. Look, I want you guys to continue to do this. I want this, in your example, I want it to be supplementary. I don't want you to count on this. Mm-hmm. Well, great. You know, Grant, can you educate these kids? Can you, and they say kids, 40s and 50s, you know, teach them about what does it mean to invest? Why are we doing it this way? Why have you helped me invest my money this way over the last 10 years? And the amount of families that have been thankful for that, and the amount of wealth we've been able to transfer and maintain has been astronomical because of just simply having these conversations and having the education that goes with it.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think too, from you know, when you're talking about being able to talk about openly, here's the plan, here's why so-and-so is going what. In some families where after the parents pass away and there's a distribution of assets and it says in the trust, okay, so-and-so is going to get real estate, so-and-so is going to get business. And it's not just an equal split. All the time, I hear all the time, people will say, well, Mom or Dad, this is what they intended.
Yeah.
Well, where does it say that in writing?
Right, exactly.
But everyone
How do you know that?
you just start to hear this, like, the intent was this, the intent was this. Now, as a legal professional, I can't go off of any
hearsay, right?
It's got to be
right?
written down. And so I think, you know, either you take great pains to write it out, or you have those conversations beforehand, right? So then everyone can kind of talk about it. And, you know, you talk about, you know, where you see either family dynamics go south, or you talk about litigation potentially, is in some of those, we're not treating everyone, quote, perfectly equal, pro rata split, and there's no explanation.
Yeah.
No idea why.
Yeah.
And that gets kids to feel a certain way. And then all of the, however long they've been siblings becomes part of that.
I can't even imagine being around that mahogany table with, you know, this kid, the oldest son got most of the business. This one didn't get anything. I mean, how would anybody sit there and not be emotional and be upset and just absolutely rip that family apart? You know, well, this is what Dad wanted. You don't know that. Yeah. So having those conversations beforehand has been very, very important. And having, you know, all the professionals on the same page, it preserves wealth like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah. And I think in terms of, like, if someone says, for our family dynamic, for our types of assets in our portfolio, it makes sense to have family meetings, maybe periodically. You know, who kind of like coordinates that? I think the financial planner, great person to do that. You would ideally be in touch with the attorney and the CPA, and maybe if there's a property manager, different types of things.
Yeah.
Coordinating that is good. You know, attorneys can do it too, but you know, sometimes you are able to see the big picture of all the financial assets. Yeah. Right. And again, people tend to come to me just on like certain life events or certain big transactions where you're seeing them like regularly, you know, at least on an annual basis.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Perfect. John, thank you so much. This has been another episode of Planning in Practice. John, before we go, if anyone, you know, does need a trust or does want to look at or review what their current situation is, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so again, I'm John Hannon, do estate planning, trust administration, tax law, attorney at Murtaugh Law, which is in Irvine. So you can find us on the internet, or you can reach out to Grant and he'll connect you to me.
Be happy to introduce you. Let me know. Appreciate you guys watching, and we'll speak soon.